Welcome to The Problem, a Lockwood & Co. podcast. I'm Caitlin.
I'm Alan.
And today we are talking about the second part of part 4, The Hall. I really thought for a second that said The Hell, which would be kind of accurate also.
The hell in many ways.
Yeah.
The hell is this?
So in chapter 20, Lockwood reveals that he smuggled flares into the mansion, and George realizes there must be hidden passages that most likely contain the source. Yay.
Yeah, this is almost like a George chapter, I feel like. He really shines here.
He does. And maybe that's why I feel like in these 4 chapters in particular, not one nice thing is said about George. Or at least not one completely nice thing. There's always something else.
Yeah. There's always some backhanded comment that happens. And later, there's even a backhanded hand that happens. So
I don't think she backhands him.
It really is left up to the reader. And I prefer to think of a backhand.
It would be funny just that's how Fairfax murdered Annabelle. So at least he had done the same thing to George. That's not funny at all, but it is kind of funny. Anyways, the chapter art is a key. And since we're not recording the part, because we recorded the last chapters like a week ago, I'd completely forgotten that they had a key to the Red Room. So until the very end of the chapter, where
what's this key about?
Where they use the key on the Red Room, I was like, but why? This makes no sense. But then, right there at the end, it came into play. And I was like, all right. Gave them a key. It
looks like a tiny key to me for like a room. This looks like almost like a padlock key or something.
Might be perspective, but you're right. The sort of shaft part of it does look short.
Yeah, I don't know, but that could be like old doors. You know, like I live in America, so like we're like, oh, this house is really old. It's from like 1970s, but in England it's like this is hundreds of years old. Okay, so like maybe keys were smaller. This
is funny because the house I live in right now was built in the 70s, and I'm moving next month, and so somebody was asking me about my new place as if it was a new place or an older place, and I was like, well, it was built in the 80s, so at least I'm older than it this time. It's newer than the place I live in now.
Yeah, that's not the same way in the old world. It's,
no.
Truly old thing.
I have used a key like that before in an old English manner because it was like a skeleton key like that locked the cupboard under the stairs where we kept all the vacuums.
Yeah, that's more what it looks like, I think, is like a cupboard key or something like that. Yeah.
It was fun. I felt very old-timey anytime I had to go in there and get a vacuum. Or a Hoover, as the English would say.
A Hoover.
Anyways, getting into things, Lockwood has a moment where he walks off and apparently at first needs to use the bathroom again, which, to be fair, they drink a lot of tea.
Okay. So, yeah.
But then, no, he turns out he was just getting the flares that he hid in there. And this is the first time I've thought about this, which is funny because of how much it comes up in the book. But I'm like, this world is just cool with children walking around with explosives.
Yeah. And it talks about Lucy, learning to build explosives when she was a child. Yep. Like that was a part of her childhood.
And then after Lockwood sort of hands out the flares, Lucy even says, I took comforting possession of the cylinders. She has
yay.
Oh, I have a bomb again. Thank God.
There's dynamite on my hip. Yeah.
So that's a different world.
Yeah. It's pretty crazy. I did want to, and it's true too, because he talks about I went into Satchel's and bought these. So it wasn't like, sir, you are not 18 years old. You cannot do this. He was like, I own Lockwood & Co. and they're like, yeah, whatever. Here's a bunch of bombs.
Oh, that's hilarious. Just 16-year-old can just go buy some bombs.
Yeah. And it's necessary for security. It's really weird. I did want to talk about Greek fire a little bit, which is what they equate these bombs with and gets thrown around a lot. And it's I feel like Greek fire is almost ascribed to magical qualities. Whenever I hear Greek fire, it's like mystical or mysterious. And it doesn't feel like that's what the bombs are at all. They build their own bombs or they can go to the store and buy them. This isn't they're put all the stuff in the bomb and then they do a ritual in a chalk circle or, you know what I mean? It's not magic. It's just chemistry, right? Mm-hmm. But I think the part of the reason why Greek fire in the real world has so much mystery around it is because we don't really know what it was or like how to make it or anything like that. And so it kind of like becomes whatever we want it to be. And it comes from like when the Roman Empire kind of fell and the capital moved from Rome to like Constantinople, and they came up with a way to use chemistry in warfare that was like a closely guarded state secret. And it ended up being called Greek fire because the guy who invented it, who was named and excuse me, because like I'm an idiot and it's easy to read these names in your head but not with your mouth,
right? Yeah,
so much. But his name was Callicanus of Heliopolis. He was a Jewish Greek guy who worked for the state he was a chemist. And he came up basically with like, I always think of it as like lime fire, but we don't actually know how it works. But it wasn't like you had to set it on fire. It was like if you put it in water, it would ignite. And if it sat out in the sun too long, it would spontaneously combust. So it was pretty like unstable stuff. And you had to like keep it covered, and they would put it in pots and things like that, and then throw the pots at their enemies. And when they break open, they would just boom, like burst into flame and stuff. And so it's pretty devastating weapon. And they just kept the formula a closely guarded secret. And this was like in the year 600 AD or so. And it lasted all the way up until like the Crusades in the 11 and 1200s. Europeans came across Saracens, in the so-called Promised Land, and then they would throw these grenades at them and the knights would catch on fire, and they're like, what is this? This is crazy magic. And so they called it Greek fire when they found out who the inventor was and stuff. But when Constantinople fell, the formula was lost. We don't know how to make it. And it's just has this air of mystery about it. We just don't know what Greek fire was. And so lots of people have appropriated the idea of it. It's kind of like the Library of Alexandria has like whatever thing that you want to be in the
right.
Library of Alexandria. It's like the same kind of thing. Like it's just magic fire. Who knows what it is? But this has the ability that it just seems like they call whatever their grenades are Greek fire every once in a while, and it just gets rid of ghosts.
I've always thought that like they have their salt bombs and then they have their bombs,
Right.
and what a stupid
Fire
thing to
bombs.
say, bombs.
No, I know what you mean though. Yeah.
And those are the ones that they call Greek fire to separate them from the salt and or silver bomb things.
Yeah, because sometimes they call them magnesium flares, which like gives you a pretty good idea that it's like a white fire.
But after Lockwood is handing them out, the flares, they have a bit of a talk about how Fairfax is actually a terrible person. And Lockwood says, George brings up that if they light anything on fire, they're not going to get money. They'll probably just get sued by Fairfax and be right back where they started. But Lockwood finally has some sense and is like, oh, well, we'll be alive.
Right. Yeah.
Can't sue us if we're dead.
There's a good moment too where like Lockwood really feels like he's turned around on Fairfax somehow, where he like after he's distributed all the bombs, he like has all this leftover packing and he just crumples it up and puts it inside of like one of the Ming vases.
I think it was a Han vase,
like,
but yeah. It was good. And then they sort of start to get to work and start walking around, set up a home base in the library, take some temperature readings and stuff. And every time I see Fahrenheit, I get angry. Not because I'm angry at Fahrenheit. America can do whatever they want, really. But just I'm angry that they changed it.
Yeah.
Ugh.
It makes it so that it's so stark too. When I was reading it, I was like, it makes it so that I can understand it. But then it just points out to me how dumb it is to be like the freezing point of water is 32 degrees. And it's like, why? Like 0 makes so much more sense. It's dumb.
It's not even that makes that I have a problem with. It's just wrong. Like they're in England. These are English kids. They wouldn't be using Fahrenheit. Like like I said, I don't care what people in America want. Use imperial all you want. If it makes sense to you, that's all that matters. But these aren't people in America.
Yeah. It'd be like you're doing the dub for an anime and you'd be like, we got to call this character Bob since we're speaking in English now.
Well, I mean, that's what all anime did in the 90s, but yeah.
I know. It's like wild. Yep. So we just don't care. We'll change whatever we want to make ourselves comfortable. That's how it is. There's too much anime references in our podcast.
Well, it's our podcast. We can talk about whatever we want.
Yep.
Except that it is a Lockwood and Co podcast. So
right.
We do have to. So eventually, sort of as things get darker, like the sun goes down and everything, there starts to be these wisps that come out.
Yeah.
These creepy, like plasmy wisp thing, ghost wisps. And I'm so curious about whether or not you can get ghost touched by these wisps. Or if they're
I kept thinking that too. Yeah.
If they're just creepy.
Or if it's like because the temperature is dropping so fast that it's just like condensation, but it doesn't seem like it.
No, it seems like they're, if you were seeing them in the show, they'd be green.
Right. Yeah. And they move around willfully and things like that. But they don't seem to be like actively dangerous. They walk through them and stuff. I like how by the book, so much of this part is, like by the Fitz manual book, they're like really being methodical and stuff. And it just like confirms what Lucy is also feeling at the same time. She keeps talking about like, I can feel the malaise start coming on. I can see the wisps and all of that kind of stuff. So there's like this slow, nice build that's happening on two parallel tracks.
And she says that she begins to hear a low-lying crackling sound, like radio static at the far edge of perception. And I don't like that. That's creepy.
Yeah.
Radio crackling is never good.
It's weird how, like radios are like modern technology, but they're always like been a part of ghost culture. Like it's always barely hearing voices in radio static is like such a ghost hunter thing.
This makes complete sense to me though, because the way radios work, where I feel like if you just tune in correctly, you could pick up on potentially anything. That holds a lot of storytelling in it.
Yep.
So that makes absolute sense to me. And even like if you're just playing around with a radio and you just get the crackling, sometimes it does feel like, oh, I just got to get it right and then I'll get something. But actually you're in completely the wrong spot. So what the hell were you hearing?
Mm-hmm. It's just creepy to hear voices come out of a box too.
Yep.
It's just weird.
I've come across this in a couple creepy video games recently. Did not like.
and while all these things are happening, Stroud remains Stroud, where there's like Lucy takes a minute to say, by the time we finished with the ground floor and arrived back at the staircase, we've been exposed to a whole range of sinister mists, sounds, and odors, not all of them courtesy of George.
Jeez. Oh, that's terrible.
But it's not so, heavy and dark. There's like, you take a minute.
This whole section, he does a really good job of making it very creepy and then throwing in the meanest joke about George or something like that just to release the tension. So
it's good stuff.
That's fun. And they also start seeing like some type 1 ghosts. And that confuses me about how sources work. Because like, are they all tied to the big source? Or did the type 1s that they find earlier on in the night, do they all have their own source that they need to find? Because we've seen some other type 1s, like the ghost under the tree, and he had his own source that they needed to deal with. Yeah. So what? I need answers.
Yeah. So my headcanon around that is basically like, I think they all do have sources. I don't know what they are, but I think that the source, the main source, is like so powerful that it works like an amplifier or something like that. Mm-hmm. And that if that wasn't there, or when it's not there later, that these sources just don't have the juice to come through on their own. Right. And so like they won't matter. They wouldn't be there.
All right. I like that.
I have no evidence for that.
No,
that's
but
just an
it
intuition.
Makes sense because once they do deal with the source, it does seem like the rest of the ghosts go away.
Yeah. If I had more evidence, then I would like make suppositions about like, does the problem work this way? Like from the origin, is it like worse? And blah, blah, blah. But like, I just don't know enough. So it seems to work here that way, though. There is like this whole thing with the type 1s too reminds me of the Hope House at the beginning and the man falling down the stairs.
Yeah.
Like we're getting the same kind of like, that wasn't dangerous, but it was definitely like creepy. Mm-hmm. And we're getting like the same kind of structural like repetition of that first encounter and also of Lucy's final job with Jacobs, where there's like an initial kind of harmless seeming ghost or shade that leads to like a more dangerous encounter later.
Yes.
So he's like repeating the structure. I think this is on purpose so that we can kind of invert it later and have like a really satisfying catharsis.
But this one is like amped up to 1,000,000.
1,000,000. Yeah.
I guess I could have said 11, but whatever. That would have been
I
a good
also
joke.
went for 1,000,000.
Yeah.
It's because I think it is. It's much more intense.
And they have this one moment when they're looking through the cellars where Lockwood kind of pushes George out of the way because a ghost like peeked out through the wall.
Mm.
And I really wish they'd kept that in the show. It's such a good moment.
Mm-hmm. And it's like, it just shows you like how crazy dangerous the job is too.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just such a good horror movie moment.
And like how his talent works, where George's leaves him kind of vulnerable to that type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they all get back together and George goes over everything, or they all gather again in the library and George.
Yeah. He lays out his whole
findings.
map. Yeah. And I think this is another, like, this is where the inversions start to happen because, of course, George wasn't along on the Hope house haunting. And so this really shows, like, if they did have George there, things would have gone way differently, probably.
They're here. They're the team now. Everyone's doing their role. And
this is, like, pretty clutch to solving the whole thing, because if they don't go into the Red Room with the idea that they're, that the architecture is weird and that the source is beyond the room, like they would have probably died. Yeah,
exactly. And while George is going over everything, Lockwood seems to not be paying any attention as he's looking at scrapbooks.
But then my note on that was that this is like the Lockwood moment again, where he's like detecting, he's like doing... He's like really solving it, the whole macro issue, while the details are being ironed out by his group. But like here, it's like a good thing that he's doing that kind of like, I mean, he should be paying attention, but at the same time, like he's really putting the pieces together.
Yes. I will say this bit feels a little handholdy to me.
Yeah.
Not much of the book does, but this bit where like just the fact that we keep nailing on this point of Fairfax was an actor, blah, 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 blah. And how Lockwood has to keep sort of investigating when, like, we get it. I don't know. It feels a little handholdy to me. And also that he just refuses to say anything to George and Lucy.
Yeah, he's keeping the details back, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah.
I do like the idea, there's like a trope in detective fiction where, like, when your attention is, like, away from the mystery, then you like put the piece together subconsciously or something like that, which this might, I don't know, that maybe this seems like the opposite, but it seems like he should be paying attention to like not dying in the Red Room and in the mansion and stuff.
Yeah.
But instead his mind is like preoccupied with the Annie Ward stuff and like, why did Fairfax put us in this situation stuff? Just
after that, though, we do have a good moment where Lockwood is like, look, we have the money, we can just walk away.
Yeah, good point.
So, I mean, he does have that one, well, not just, he has more than one moment, but this one big moment, I suppose, where he is a good leader and he's like, we don't have to do this. He does say, I want to do it. I think we can do it. But if you guys don't want to, we can walk away. And I like that they gave him that moment.
Yeah, and it's important to, like, character-wise to exercise your, like, agency and to be like, we choose to do this instead of being forced to do it. That's always stronger.
And also, this is one of the moments where we really start to see Lucy cataloging Lockwood's different smiles. Because she's like, he leans back and he has this warm, welcoming, casual, friendly smile, which is different than this smile of his.
Yeah. You remember that set of files that George has on all the ghosts? That's what Lucy has about all of Lockwood's smiles.
Yeah.
This is a type 2 smile and a type...
Yeah, exactly.
I did highlight, like, right in this section, I think this is a big turning point for Lucy, where it says, we'd worked well together, so much better than ever before. We'd been careful, rigorous, even competent, and it showed me what Lockwood & Co. might one day become. This wasn't something I wanted to give up lightly.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think this is really big because it's not about, like, for Lucy, so much of this has been, does she trust herself or her instincts? But now she, like, learns to trust the group. Yeah. And she trusts her role in the group. And that can make things really different for her in a way that wasn't possible I feel like.
Yeah. To be a part of both a team that she respects and works well with and that has a good leader.
Yeah.
Yeah, she doesn't want to give that up.
And she doesn't have to be responsible. Like, I'm sure she blames herself for everyone dying, you know, on some level, even though she rightly blames Jacobs. But it's like she doesn't have to shoulder that here alone. But then she also doesn't have to like only like go off on her own because of her unique talents. They're all balanced out because of the group. And she like realizes that and is able to embrace it. So I think this is like a really, really important moment for her.
Mm-hmm. And then they make their way to the red room. And Lucy says, it's like they're waiting for us to go in. And then, of course, George immediately says, who's got the mints? I just know we're going to need the mints in there.
They go through so many mints through this whole section, too.
And then
so much gum.
Right at the bottom of the page, just at the end of the chapter, Lockwood says, don't worry, it'll be fine. Like, why would you say that, Lockwood?
And then the line right after that, it says, and then the horror of the night began.
Yeah.
So, like, you're really asking for it, man.
So they go in the red room. Chapter 21.
Chapter 21, where I go back to the document. In chapter 21, the Iron Trio enter the Red Room, get locked in, and find the hidden passage out.
Yeah, that is all that happens in this chapter, but it is also a very long chapter with a lot of just creepiness.
I think this is really, really well done. I think this stuff in particular is like part of the reason why people, I don't know this at all, so this is a total supposition on my part, but I feel like the Red Room and like everything after it is like why people wanted to adapt this thing, because it's just so well described and like the way it all turns out is so cool that it's just like, oh man, this would be great on screen.
It's very theatrical, yeah. And very visual. The chapter art is the chandelier in the Red Room with the spider webs on it.
Yeah, good stuff.
Which is the only piece of, I don't know, furniture, would you call that furniture, in the room? Otherwise, it's just a large, empty room. I wonder why. I'm sure it's not creepy at all. They gave him this line in the show too, but I really love George's, not very red, is it?
Yeah.
Like, what do you think is going to happen, my dude? You're in a haunted house. It's called the Red Room. What substance is creepy and red, you know?
Yeah.
I guess maybe he's never seen The Shining or read it. I don't know.
That's exactly what's going on. Yeah, I wonder if that's where like the Red Duke thing comes from too. If he's like related to this room at all. Well, I have no idea.
Or just maybe if he has his own ghost, maybe it's covered in blood.
Yeah.
Because of all the heads he chopped off. I don't know. He really didn't come into the haunting at all. So maybe he was just made up, part of the myths.
Yeah, he's probably like one of the shades.
Yeah.
In the first room, just like sipping a cup over and over, caught in some meaningless loop. He's like, doesn't matter.
And then I love when George goes to secure the door and he's like, I have the latest tech. It's a wedge.
It's a DFD.
Yeah, that's good. And how
I do like that they come prepared though. Like when they have George here, they didn't forget the chains. He's got the latest technology. I mean, it's like a joke that it's the latest technology, but it is
iron
technology.
Covered by some wood. Why wouldn't you just have it be iron? But whatever.
That's what they do in the show, right? It's just pure
just a block of iron.
Yeah. It would be very heavy to just carry around a big lump of iron.
That's fair. But they cut all the humor in this scene out of the show, which is probably the good choice.
Yeah.
For a TV show.
I just happened to rewatch that episode, Eating Breakfast. Like I didn't intend to today. And
it's just magically turned on.
Well, I was like, what am I gonna watch? I don't know. And then I was like, I'll watch Lockwood and Co. And it was on that episode. Like I had watched the second one before. Right. And so it just the Red Room is all of like 3 or 4 minutes. It's like very fast. So yeah, they just didn't have time.
Yeah, I get all the choices that they made in the show, and I think all the choices they made make absolute sense. Well, most of them anyways. But I do also wish we could have really lingered here and been really creeped out by this room. Not just had it, because in the show it's very actiony, I guess. Like it's a go, go, go moment. And here it's very a slow building.
Oh, it's such a slow burn. It's so creepy too.
Yeah.
It's really easy to picture. And I feel it too. Like they talk about the smells and the temperature And it's just like, oh, this whole thing is terrible.
Speaking of the smells, as soon as Lockwood started talking about that, I was like, is smell a talent? Can you imagine showing up at Fitz with your smell? Being like, you should give me a job. I can sniff out any ghost.
Hello, I'm a smeller,
Oh, God.
I am.
Oh, God.
I need a job, sir. Yeah.
I'm not cutting that
I can
out.
see it.
I want you to know.
Oh, no, I wouldn't. Yeah,
Okay, good.
That's my terrible accent. That's my terrible Oliver Twist. Yeah. It would be like, what's your talent? I'm a listener. I'm a smeller. That's not a talent. It would be like, get out of here. Go join the Night Watch, kid.
The twist, though, is that he really can sniff out any ghosts, and he's the most... Anyways, moving on.
This is a fan fiction now.
Yeah. They start looking for the entrance to the secret passage. I like how they set this up with George kind of being lookout in the Iron Circle and Lucy and Lockwood searching.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually Lockwood can see all the death glows again, and there are dozens.
Yeah, even George can see flickers in the air. And so it's like building and building. Lucy's hearing whispering that's building and building.
The death glow thing is interesting, though, because previous and like after this, whenever death glows come up, it just seems to be a thing that happens. You know, somebody dies, they leave behind a glow. But this implies that the ghosts were hiding the death glows from him.
Yeah.
And then once they were trapped, they were
they're like moving or something too. It's like, I always think of them as being stationary, but this is like moving around.
It's very different.
He has to wear his glasses here, which is always like, that's always how I think of Lockwood.
With his sunglasses on, even though it's dark.
Yeah. Yep. It's not fair though, because like he doesn't put them on very often. Like he didn't have them on, but I think it's just the vibe that I get from Lockwood is that he would be the guy who wears sunglasses at night.
While doing his fake accents.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's my rural accent in my Ray-Ban glasses. Yeah.
So then we get this really great moment where Lucy says, for some reason, the bathroom back in Portland Row came to mind, the lower one where I sometimes took a shower and where George's discarded underwear lay in wait for unwary feet. At first, I thought it might be the shared sense of danger and foreboding that made me make the connection.
I'm so glad you said this. This is like the only thing that I highlighted in the chapter. I was like, oh my God.
Wow. George cannot catch a break, but actually it's the leaky tap.
It's the tap, tap, tap sound. Yeah, that's what's
water.
The association and not the underwear, it turns out. Yeah, there's just not a moment missed to bring George's pegs down in this chronicle.
And I will say, to be fair, it's mostly all in Lucy's head. She doesn't say that many of them out loud.
Right.
So that's, at least in these chapters. So that's something, I guess. God. Oof. And then we learn that the DFD tech didn't work.
Right. Yeah. The door closes behind them, which is, you know, classic good storytelling, no choice, no way out but through kind of stuff.
Yep. And that Lockwood left the key in the door. So now they're locked in.
Yep. And so now they have to find the secret passage that George was pretty sure was here.
I do feel like the leaving the key in the door thing, like he didn't know it wasn't a poltergeist. And like that seems very irresponsible of him.
Yeah, I can't understand that one at all. Like, why wouldn't you put it back in your pocket?
Yeah. So then the room is sort of slowly filling up with the plasm blood. And eventually they figure out that it's going to get them in the circle too. So
yeah, it's just everywhere.
Yeah.
The iron, it's cool because like we've set up that the iron is so important to keep them safe. And now even that is not enough to do the job. And so you're just like, oh, this is a nightmare. So they can't just like hunker down here and kind of like wait it out. They really have to solve the problem and like get out there and do something about it. They also talk about like the blood makes it a changer.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so like for the first time, we're talking about something other than a poltergeist, which is like, you know, lore stuff, world building stuff. It's a little bit interesting.
Yeah, they do mention, this is, I suppose, where they mentioned that a poltergeist could move things. So it could have turned the key and potentially moved the DFD, although they think that would be impossible because it's iron. But because this is blood, they're like, this is not a poltergeist. It's obviously a changer, which means someone living must have removed the wedge, the DFD. I'm so sorry. And locked the door.
Yeah. And Lockwood like berates himself about it, that he's been stupid. He's underestimated everything.
Yes.
Like he didn't understand the danger that he was bringing them into. But he luckily puts all the weight on Lucy and says, you're going to have to find the secret exit. So good luck saving us all.
I really enjoy when she's like, but why me? And he's like, you're a girl. Aren't you supposed to be more sensitive? And it's like reductive.
Oh my God.
And then a second later, he's like, besides, all me and George are good at are swinging our rapiers around.
Yeah. So then
it's weird. It's reductive, but also kind of complimentary. I don't know.
It's like gender essentialism on both sides. Like men are inept and inadequate and women are sensitive and responsible. Like, great. I told you before about like in a Kindle, it'll show you when other people have highlighted things. And that's the most highlighted part of it. Is like hundreds of people have highlighted.
Other people are pissed.
You're a girl. Aren't you supposed to be more sensitive? Like people for some reason take note of that. Lockwood in here with gender jokes at a time like this.
To be fair, it seems pretty accurate for a 16-year-old boy to say that. So
yeah.
So eventually they get kind of hemmed in to the corner where Lucy thinks the door to the secret passageway is. And then it ends up being in like the boarded over window, right? Like that ends up not being a board. That's the door that they have to rip off.
Yeah. And I don't even think it's a window, right? It's
right.
Like,
it looks like a window, but it's the boarded up. Yeah. So they eventually, Lockwood and George rip that off and they all tumble through.
Yeah. Into a corridor. Like, it talks about all the cobwebs in there.
Yeah. And like just as the plasma blood has trapped them in that corner. So at the last moment, they are saved.
Yeah.
And then in chapter 22, they find the actual screaming staircase and the source of the haunting. And that is what our chapter art is, the screaming staircase.
Yeah, which is always, I always forget that it's a winding staircase, which is so good for like a creepy staircase because you can never see the bottom of it.
Yeah.
You're always coming around the corner. It's really good.
So they quickly take stock of themselves. George does mention that his jacket is ruined. So, of course, Lucy says, that's good. It's an awful jacket because we can't take a moment to not be mean.
Well, George had said right before that.
Yes.
She's like, George, are you okay? And he's like, no, someone's butt is flattening my foot. So she kind of claps back.
Yes.
She's like, fair. I was asking about your health.
I do love this dynamic of them. I don't know, just being mean to each other. It's great.
Yeah, my note was sibling energy right there.
Lockwood then comes up with like a good theory about things, and then Lucy's just like, you really haven't got a clue, have you? He's like, no.
He's making it up. Yeah, he truly doesn't know.
Oh, about why the ghost can't pass through the wall to get them.
Yeah, I like all that stuff. George kind of like, because he has this whole thing about, well, maybe there's a rule about ghosts that blah, 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 they can't do this. And George is like, no, scientific materialism, like the door is covered in iron. There's iron in the floor. There's, like there's reason why the ghost can't come in here. That's why. It's not lore reasons. It's like real reasons.
So they get ready to head down this hallway that they're in. And then Lockwood says something about, there being stronger visitations to come. It's like stronger than the Red Room. Maybe y'all are fucked.
Yeah, it's bad stuff.
And then George says, like, shame we can't use caged cat like Tom Rotwell did. Poor kitties.
Showing the other side of materialist science.
Yeah.
The side that created the atomic bomb and stuff. Yeah. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. I like the moment where she talks about Lockwood. It says like he had taken off his sunglasses and his dark eyes glittered. His jaw was set. I could see at once that he had drawn his emotions deep inside himself, made them hard and steely. There was something in his face I hadn't seen before. And good. It's like, it reminds me of Jacobs in the other one and how scared he was, and him smoking the cigarette while he watched all the children die. And like, this is the opposite. Like Lockwood has control of himself. He has control of his fear and his emotions. And that's like part of what makes him a trusted leader to Lucy. It's part of the inversion, I think.
I also feel like it's passages like that gave Lockwood his personality.
Yeah, he's very cool there.
And then they talk a little bit about Fairfax, and we get a bit of Lockwood dropping the mystery that he's figured out, even though we're still not allowed to get everything, which is fair. You know, I love a good evil monologue at the end. So I get the saving it. It does sort of feel like maybe he could have brought it up less then, but whatever.
Yeah,
But
there's
I mean, Stroud could have brought it up less.
right. There's the whole, like, I think this is really tough because we're writing for like a grade school kids, you know, and we don't want to assume they're stupid. And he's done like a really good job of covering his tracks, you know, with the red herring and all of their assumptions around what's going on and stuff. But he does have to like start to break that down for a young reader. And these breadcrumbs, I think, kind of help to lead you to the conclusion that, like, wait a minute, maybe everything is not what it seems.
That's fair. And I should say, I don't think Fairfax actually monologues at the end. He sort of invites them to monologue to him. So
yeah, I think it's a really classic, like, Agatha Christie kind of like the detectives.
Get everybody in the room, sit them all down, tell them what happened, and see if the murderer outs themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's good. I do want to say that if it gets colder, so they all put on their warmer, like their hats and gloves and zip up their coats and stuff. And George crammed his head inside his foul green bubble hat.
Yeah.
Because it can't just be a green bubble hat. It has to be foul.
Do you think that's like a commentary on color or smell?
I'm sure it's both.
It's both.
And then they see the Fitzkid's ghost.
Yeah. It's and they recognize it because of the like clothes and stuff.
Yeah, the uniform and stuff.
It's another inversion of the Jacob's haunting where they see a child ghost who leads them deeper into danger. But this one,
yes.
It's not trying to get them. It's not trying to, like, it's really interesting. I think we talked about this in the show.
We did,
how, the ghost is not like malevolent. It seems to be like helpful, and it is kind of like, whoa, can ghosts do that? Like, what even is that?
Yeah, and they don't seem to question it. They literally say it feels like he's trying to warn us or trying to tell us something.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. And then is this where they find the staircase? Well, either way, as they walk on, George says, "Don't trip on a piece of the Fitzkid, Lockwood. He's down here somewhere."
He's like, why would you bring that up, man?
I do like, that's at the very bottom of the page in my book. So I just wrote, geez, that's gruesome. But then on the next page, Lucy's like, why would you even say that? And he's like, I guess because I'm nervous. And I'm like, you know, that's fair enough, George. Which is my note, exactly what Lucy says. On
the same thing, my note is he's getting real. Like, he's being honest. Yeah. Like, that's how scared George is. He's like, he's not just doing the joke. Now he's like, I'm just scared. Okay.
Yeah. And then as things get colder, they realize that they are sort of near the cellars, which is where the coldest bit in the house was that they explored earlier.
Right. Yeah. So they knew that it was connected to this wall.
Yeah.
And so, like, I really like that, like the spatial stuff, and it shows how good George is. Like, he pretty much cracked the case on like wherever this wall leads to is like the key to things.
Yeah. And it also, I just like how clearly Stroud must have thought out the planning of the building and put it all together. And then they find the staircase, and Lucy is like, this wouldn't be the staircase, isn't? George is like, no, don't worry, that was the other one. And then after a while, George is like, well, maybe, no, I guess it didn't actually say. So, it's just a legend. Let's go.
It'll be fine, I hope, basically. Yeah. And again, I think this is like a deliberate inversion of the Hope haunting, where like the very first thing that we get is the secondary haunting of the staircase, the guy falling down the staircase and the noise of that and how it startles Lucy.
Yep.
And the death glow of it and everything for Lockwood. But like, that's not the actual real haunting. It's like something later. And now it's the opposite. Like, the Red Room was like bad enough, right? But this is the real thing. And this is terrible. Like, the sound of this and everything is the thing that almost kills them. Yeah. So like, all of it's like turned inside out, kind of.
So yeah, as they start down the stairs, Lucy takes her glove out of her hand, takes her hand out of her glove.
That would be really creepy. Yeah.
That would be, yeah. And touches the staircase and gets kind of drawn into some creepy sounds. And I really was drawn into this bit when she's like, she could hear the chainmail and the trampling boots. And that bit's really, I like it. And then eventually she pulls her hand back, puts her glove back on, and is like, guys, we gotta get out of here. But then this is where Lockwood seems to figure it out. I don't know what happened here that he's like, oh, I've been an idiot.
It's like his mind is running as far away from this situation as possible. Like he's just disassociating really hard here.
Yeah, but I hate this bit. Not hate's a strong word, but I feel like he figured out, like, what was he figuring out before then? Like, I thought he was like, oh, Fairfax must be the murderer before, but we don't have enough evidence. So if we go, we can probably find some more evidence and put it all together. But he has this moment here where he's like, oh, wait, I figured it out. And I'm like, so what did you figure out here? I don't know. It just seems weird.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. And that's why I said too, like in the earlier part of part 4, there's like so much setup with Lockwood that it really seems like he's got the case under control. But then we have this moment here where he's putting the parts together. And I always love that in detective fiction where they put the parts together, but it just kind of doesn't make sense for all of his actions earlier.
Yeah.
Like he was going on a hunch, I guess, setting up all the rest of this.
But like, this feels like the aha moment. Fairfax must have killed Annabelle Ward. But
right.
Like, there's no way he wouldn't have at least thought that before. Yeah. With the way that he's been acting and what he's been doing. With
the, like, were you holding the picture like this or this?
You're like, exactly.
What are you asking that for? It's very weird.
So I just don't know what happened in this moment. And somebody should please ask Jonathan Stroud what the aha moment here was. Anyways, as George and Lockwood are having a bit of an argument about this, because Lockwood is like, I'll tell you all later. And George is like, no, tell us now, which I am fully behind. Thank you, George. But at the same time, Lucy's like, no. This is a problem. The screaming is starting. We gotta go. Get off the stairs.
Yeah. And George is like, well, maybe it's only you and your talent. Yeah. And then he like stops in the middle of saying that because even he starts to hear it. And then all of them start to like trying to cover their ears and running, but they can't, keep it from going inside of them.
Yeah.
It just
it's
gets
very
worse and worse.
Interesting. I cannot believe they cut this out of the show. I know I talked a lot about it when we were doing the show, but it's the screaming staircase. And also this bit is so creepy.
Yeah, I kept thinking that when I was reading it this time about you talking about that. And it's such a like easy classic special effect to run audio over visual of, some people screaming. Like there's no cost to it. It's so weird.
No extra. No special effect,
it's just
really.
them acting. Yeah. Like, I hate it. But that's it. Just them covering their ears. Really weird.
So they sort of run/fall down the stairs, and then they all kind of end up sprawled at the bottom, and even then the screaming doesn't stop.
It's really scary. I think this part is genuinely scary. When I was reading it, like my heart was pounding.
Yeah.
She's talking about red hot irons boring into her head. I was like, this is terrible. It's good writing.
Yeah. And then when they do sort of get all the way down there, they find the body of the Fitzboy, and Lockwood starts shouting to find, and also a well, and Lockwood starts shouting to find the source. And I like that they come back on this because, like, obviously the source is in the well.
Right.
But they sort of come back to it later and be like, oh yeah, why didn't we just think that? The ghost must have been messing with us with the screaming and everything.
Yeah. And it's just like, again, in the Hope haunting, when we find out about malaise for the first time and that kind of internal struggle against the ghost, this ghost is so much more powerful that they don't even realize that they've already been kind of co-opted and compromised. And so that they're not able to see the solution, even though it's right in front of them.
And like,
I really like that though, because it like relies, it's like a little bit ironic. It's like, oh, the rules, reader, of like what's going on. And so you can understand why all this is happening. It's pretty cool.
And then there's a bit where like a long fingered and bony hand reaches out for George. No, thank you.
Terrible.
Don't like that. And then Lucy just sort of describes the desperation and panic that overtakes them. And then suddenly in her head, we see her just sort of lose all hope. And we don't really know, like, obviously it's the ghost, but the book just says it as if this is the only way.
Yeah, she's like, there is a way to make the screaming stop.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah, all I have to do is throw myself down this well.
And she starts talking about silence kind of as a desirable thing. And I like that since she's a listener and silence must hold great appeal for her.
Yeah. And it goes back to when she stepped into the house and like she sensed the silence that was like really deep and reaching for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then as she's sort of walking towards the well, she feels Annabelle Ward in the necklace, and that makes her pause for a moment. And like ultimately Lockwood saves her from jumping in the well, but he probably wouldn't have gotten there in time if she hadn't paused. So I like that Annabelle Ward saves her also.
Oh, I really like that. Yeah, that's a great observation. Yeah, it's also nice to have an employer who doesn't just stand in the background smoking.
Yeah, who doesn't leave you to your death.
Throw yourself into a well. Yeah, Lockwood's there for her.
But yeah, he grabs her. She's about to jump and saves her life. And then this is where he's like, give me everything you guys have. We're throwing it in the well.
Yeah, he like he snaps out of it, right? He like controls his fear and does the thing.
And then as he's about to, or maybe just after just as he's throwing the large industrial grade explosion into the well, he says, run, Lucy, get to the stairs. And she says, but I couldn't move. I still felt the deathly pull toward the well. And I love this little exchange between the two of them because it is very much echoed in book 5, but there's a different reason that Lucy can't run away.
Ah.
And I like that a lot.
That's cool. Yeah, if you can't tell, I love when the text like repeats itself. Like I always think that's super strong.
Mm-hmm.
So I really, really like that.
Yeah.
It has a strong, like Stroud's so good at like his stingers, his end of chapter stingers, and like they throw the bomb and then like there's just a burst of light and you're like, what happens? What happens? Like you need to turn the page and keep going.
And then we're on chapter 23.
You go to chapter 23. In chapter 23, Lockwood leads George and Lucy to dig their way out while explaining all the clues about Fairfax.
And the chapter art is the wall that they have to dig through, plus a crowbar.
Right. Lucky crowbar was there. I think they brought it. It's one of their
Lucy has it on her belt.
Yeah.
Which is wild that she was running around with that. That must have been like when they fell down the stairs and all these things, like, ow. And during the explosion, like you just got a crowbar. God, that would hurt. Anyways, so Lucy has this moment where she's in like a dream, fake place. I don't know what's happening here, where she sees all of her sisters and Lockwood and Annabelle Ward, but not George.
It's heaven. George isn't there.
I don't think that's what's happening there, but it's very interesting.
Yeah, I don't know what that
I have no idea what happened.
I don't think it means anything.
No, I really don't either, but it was just funny. Anyway, she sort of quickly wakes up from that. There's
a lot of grogginess. It takes a long time to talk about like the aftermath of everything.
Yeah.
And like waking up and stuff.
In the show, like there's an explosion and then there's like some smokiness and then Lucy sits up. It takes her like 2 pages to sit up in the book.
Yeah.
And then she looks around. She's like, well, there's 3 unmoving bodies, but one of them was the poor the Fitz boy. And he'd had a lot of practice at not moving.
Right. I wasn't worried about the mummy. Yeah.
I do love that George actually speaks. He says some words and then she slaps him. So dude is conscious. Well, to a degree. But she's just like, George, wake up. I love it so much.
He's like, immediately he has jokes. He's like, well, that cheek was the one part of me that wasn't sore.
Yeah.
So thanks.
But at least then she gives him his glasses. So that's nice.
Yeah.
And then she just goes to find Lockwood and says hi. And then Lockwood has this moment where he's like, oh, I thought you were ... It doesn't matter. Which, of course, I've talked about how I don't like that, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, this is clear foreshadowing. I like that Stroud is like comfortable to bring in, like we're closing a lot of mysteries in this part, and for him to bring in new stuff to wonder about and be like, what does this mean? But yeah, I get your complaint.
Nobody else seems to care, so it's just me.
It doesn't bother me as much as it bothers you, but I understand.
And then George has this thing where he's like, I saw that. And Lucy's like, what? Nothing happened. And he's like, precisely. Where was his slap? Where was his firm shaking? There's double standards at work here. And I feel like this is where George realizes all the shit he's going to have to witness between the two of them.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, I see. And then they have a
like,
picnic.
It's going to escalate. And she's like, next time you're going to kick me just to cover up your favoritism, your crush. Like, just go do your thing. Leave me out of it.
But then, then they have a picnic.
I really like this. This is like life affirming. And
it sort of brings them back to the physical world. Yeah.
And replenish, and like they just really went through something and they need the energy. And I think this is really good. Like, I understand why they didn't do it in the show again because of time and stuff, but
and keeping the momentum going, it makes sense.
The mood, but it's good.
Yeah, it works really well in a book. It wouldn't work in a TV show, or at least not in the condensed timeline of the TV show.
Yeah.
So then they decide to dig themselves out since the red room is still locked, so they can't get out that way. It really bothered me in the show when they implied that they can't go back through the red room because they'll die, because they just blew up the source, so that there's no ghost. But it's locked, so they can't.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, there's no way out but through again. I also like that the source in this case was the bones, and that's what they assumed with Annie Ward.
Right,
but they were wrong. So it's like another inversion again. And the whole thing of like they dig out from below, and like Lucy, when she was trapped at the mill, had to come out from above. So like there's just all these inversions.
Yep.
Of all the past trauma that Lucy's gone through, so that, you know, like this whole, even though this is traumatic too, it's like a different kind of trauma where you like beat it. And so it just kind of like unravels a lot of the psychic suffering she has, I think.
There's a bit here where they're talking about everything, where George calls the visitor an A-grade visitor. And I'm like, is that, do we have a different type of classification system here?
Yeah, is this a Georgism?
I want to know.
I think it's a Georgism.
I suppose that makes sense. So they keep talking about the fishy things that Fairfax has been doing to them, and then they break through, and then they rest for a minute, and then although like, were I Lockwood, and I knew that, you know, Barnes was on his way, why wouldn't they just sit down there until sunrise?
It would have been smart in like when you know everything that's coming. It would have been the good play.
I guess it doesn't make sense for a story. You know, you need to have your climactic moment with the bad guy.
Yeah.
But in real life, I think they would have just sat down there and waited. Because then
it could be.
Then they wouldn't have gotten shot.
Lockwood would be like, but I figured it out. Like, I need to present my case to him. Like, I need to see his face,
you know,
I accuse him.
I would absolutely believe that of like chapter 6 Lockwood. But I feel like the whole point of this is that he's come around a bend on that sort of thing.
No, that's a good point. I have highlighted here. He says it's been an unforgivable lapse in a leader, and I'm sorry for it.
Yeah.
All that ends now. So like he really has turned a corner, and he's like doing it intentionally. And my note was like, oh, it's Dad Lockwood. Like he's like stopping all of his childhoodness to like take care of business here.
Yeah.
Taking responsibility. Yeah, you're right. I think he just wants to get them out of this place to like
that's fair.
Safety.
It wouldn't be fun sitting down there with the blown up bones and the Fitzboy and everything.
Yeah. I also like that it's not instantly like, oh, we shoved aside a few bricks and we're out. Like they really do need to take time to like move these heavy blocks and rest and then move the heavy blocks again.
Yeah.
Like it's more realistic.
And of course, there is a point where Lockwood is like, well, if we move this last big one here, even George should be able to get through.
Even Winnie the Pooh can fit through the hole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, and I guess to be fair, against my earlier point, Lockwood doesn't think that Fairfax would come back into the house. Like they don't know that he has armor, you know, that And as far as they know, Fairfax doesn't think they've blown up the source.
Right.
So
And
I guess that's fair.
He's an ancient old man who's feeble.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, that's how they see him.
So eventually they get through and they start trying to make their way to the exit. But then, of course, they are met by Fairfax and who we find out is his chauffeur with a gun. Oh, and they're both wearing weird outfits.
Right. Yeah, they have some weird hats and stuff. And there's yeah, there's all the weird. I love, again, this is like Stroud putting out some more mysteries for us to be like, oh, we've gone through all of these things that as we've been reading through them were kind of like red flags, like why don't they notice this? Isn't this weird? And Lockwood is like, wasn't that weird? Wasn't that a red flag? Shouldn't we have noticed? And so like all the mysteries are collapsing. And so Stroud is like, here's some new mysteries. Like, What is this hat? What is this outfit they're wearing? How is that? Like, why doesn't every kid in London have this?
Yeah. Or at least the adults, or, because imagine if Jacobs had that from the beginning, maybe he wouldn't have become who he became.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Something I meant to bring up, I don't even know how I missed my note about it, but just because I feel like it was another inspiration for the show, I think when they're on the staircase and just as they're making their way down, Lockwood grabs Lucy by the hand to lead her down. And I'm like, never would have done that if it was George, So that just seems very like an inspiration the show took.
Is that flirting? I don't know how that works, so.
I'm not exactly the expert either, but he wouldn't have done that for George.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, I shamefully confessed to you that like I didn't know that two characters had sex in the Wheel of Time in book 4 until book 10. So like I really don't know when these things happen. I'm like, well, maybe he's just helping her keep her balance. I don't know. Right.
But like, were it George or somebody else, he probably would have grabbed their shoulder or something.
That's true. Yeah.
So, chapter 24, in which Lockwood proves that Fairfax is Annabelle Ward's murderer, and he gets justice, and Deepak breaks down the door. And
we're wrapping it up.
Chapter art is the helmet and the goggles that Fairfax and his servant man are wearing.
It says they look like frogs.
Oh, the demonic frog. I love that description.
Yeah, it's really easy to picture. And this looks like some, German infantryman hat kind of looking thing to me.
It is a weird design in the picture, yeah.
Steampunk goggles. It's cool.
Yeah, I like these goggles a little better than what they did in the show.
Yeah, having rewatched that, they played that all so weird. He might as well not have had them.
But yeah, then they all sit down in the library again. And I hate how, where is it? Fairfax refers to it as his frontier or something like that.
Uh-huh.
Because it's like on the edge of the safe part of the house and also on the edge of the dangerous part of the house. And I'm just like, this is all manufactured by you fucking asshole.
I know, right?
This is
he
not
could easily make the whole house safe.
Yeah, like, oh, I hate him so much.
And he's like, it's like the classic, like, rich guy adventurer bullshit. Yes. Like, it's as safe as you want to make it. Like, when you're like, oh, I'm so daring and stuff because you climb into a ad hoc submarine controlled by an Xbox controller. Like, that's a choice that you fucking made. Like, It's not. Yeah.
A lot of this is maybe a deep cut, but a lot of this reminds me of this conversation in season 3 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer when Wesley first shows up and he says something about having killed a vampire one time in controlled circumstances. And Giles says, won't find any of those here, meaning the controlled circumstances.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The vampire was safely tied up in a room. And
yeah, exactly.
Like, when is that ever going to happen, dude? Yeah. And we even find out, I mean, not to spoil the chapter, but like all this shit that he's wearing doesn't keep him safe anyway. So like, he's wrong about all of this anyways.
So yeah, then Lockwood has his moment.
Yeah. I mean, this is Agatha Christie stuff. I mean, like, I think what was my note was something like Sherlock, Poirot, Lockwood. Like
You can't ever tell Lockwood that though.
no.
You should not compare him to Sherlock and Poirot. There's that great moment that I like when Fairfax says, if any of the boys do anything, shoot the girl. And just as I was thinking, ugh, then Lucy's like, ugh, as though I'm the weakest link.
Yeah. I really like that characteristic of Fairfax's personality.
Yeah.
Especially because he murdered Annie. Like that all feels of a piece to me, that his misogyny is like a part of his villainy.
Absolutely.
That's really good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do have a moment where I think it's George who says that their outfit that they're wearing looks like a dress, and he says it as an insult.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay,
yeah,
we could have done without that, George, but okay.
It's not great, but because of the misogyny that Fairfax feels, I'm sure it cut him a little bit deeper than any other insult would have too.
Yeah.
It's not a dress. This is an alloy of aluminium. This is like he gets very defensive about it.
And then we just carry on with, he and Fairfax and Annabelle were in a tumultuous relationship, and then they broke up, and then they got back together, and then that other guy, Blake, was involved, and then he dropped her off and couldn't stand that, so he slapped her.
He's like, I broke into her house.
Yep.
And then I hid inside the house. And could you believe it? Someone else dropped her off. Like the gall that she had to do that. It's like, okay, you have like all of your boundaries are fucked up, dude.
Yep.
Am I the asshole? I broke into her house. Like, look at how romantic I was being. He's like a real piece of shit.
Oh, and we find out the inscription was Shakespeare, which we know from the show. I assume anybody listening to our podcast has watched the show. We don't need to read the quote.
No, but I do like that Lockwood is like very derisive about the whole thing. He's like, it doesn't even matter what the quote is because it's some kind of self-justifying, pompous bullshit. And the guy is like, wait, here's the quote. It's really good. I have it written down here. It is. And then, like he does the whole thing and it's like, man, you are just garbage, dude.
And then he explains it to them as though they can't understand Shakespeare.
So
yeah, that's good. And then he has this whole like paragraph where he's just talking derisively about listening as a talent. And that's hilarious to me because he's part of this whole big research thing. He has these goggles on to like give himself a fake talent. I don't think we're spoiling anything there. Like obviously that's what the goggles do. What else would they do? But then he's just putting down Lucy. It just feels like maybe that's the one he's the most jealous of, because he's putting it down so much.
Point. Yeah.
And it's one that he can't manufacture.
Yeah. I like that. It's the one that's furthest out of reach. So you have to be like, well, that's the one that counts the least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's the one that that helped them solve the murder.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing with Annabelle that, her, all of her choices were the thing that were outside of his control. And that's what was intolerable about her, was that she could choose to not love him.
Yeah.
And he couldn't stand that. Yeah. Yeah. He's garbage. So bad.
Yeah. And then he talks about how he hid the body and how difficult it was on him. And then
yeah, that was really hard. Oh my God.
Lockwood does drop that he knew that something was going to happen. So Barnes and Deeprack are on their way. Actually, they'll be here by sunrise.
Yeah. Which is not a bluff. And it like pays off. Again, we were setting up things in the first half of part 4, and this is like another payoff. I do like in that part, Fairfax literally says to him, he says, put yourself in my shoes, Mr. Lockwood, before he's like, I bricked up a woman. Like, what choice did I have? But
right, yeah.
I like that appeal because that, again, like it goes back to the whole theme in the book of like putting yourself into like empathy, like putting yourself into someone else's shoes. And that he is trying to use empathy to like thwart justice. In this case, he's being like, but you don't understand. Like, think about it from my perspective. And it's like his inability to think about anything from anyone else's perspective is the whole reason that he is like this, And that's like what's wrong with the whole system is the inability to think from anybody else's perspective but your own.
I also enjoy that he says that to Lockwood, because he sees something in Lockwood that he might be able to appeal to.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me.
I just really like that moment. It's like, and it makes him so much more vile too. It's like.
So then obviously he demands to know where the locket is. And eventually Lucy, under the threat of being shot, is like, I've got it right here. I'll give it to you. And I love when she sort of stands up to pass it, to get it out or whatever. And he sees, she sees a gleeful smile on those old wide lips. It was the self-love of the murderer, and easily the most repulsive thing of all. I wondered how many others had fallen foul of him over the years, and how he had disposed of them.
Yeah.
Because of course he's killed other people.
Yeah. You know,
of course he has.
Yeah. Because that's what he was doing to them. Like, the house is a murder weapon, you know? And he was here. It was like, oh, the house didn't do it. Well, I showed up with my shotgun, you know?
Yeah.
I love the moment of like when Annabelle comes out. I think this is actually way cooler than it is in the show.
Yeah.
So I highlighted this. It says, I heard a great collective thump as all the books in the room slammed against the back wall of the shelves. Percy Grebe, who had been doing something with his gun, was blown back off his feet. He hit a bookshelf hard and collapsed on the floor. Lockwood's chair spun into George's. Both were pressed back in their seats by the wave of force erupting from my hand. All the light bulbs in the library blew.
Yep.
It's like, boom. It's like pure wrath. Just instant karma just erupts from this thing.
And it's almost like she's protecting Lucy, like Lucy's in the eye of the storm, because she's not blown back or anything like that.
She's not blown back. Yeah, I like that.
And they have this moment just before Annabelle Ward goes to kill the dude where she makes eye contact with Lucy. I love that. Mm-hmm. And then and Lucy's just like, here you go.
Get her sister.
Yeah, exactly. And then, she basically goes and hugs Fairfax, which is not a thing you want from a ghost.
Yeah, and his stuff doesn't protect him. It, it talks about the ectoplasm kind of sizzling and stuff, but she just finds her way around it.
Yep.
And kills him.
3 cheers, man. And then the locket just sort of falls to the ground, broken, and is no longer a source. And I love that. That's an interesting implication.
Yeah. So the first time I read this, that blew my mind.
Yeah.
And they didn't do that in the show. And I was like, oh, is this like lore that's contradicted later in the series? So they're like, quote unquote, fixing something? Because that felt so big to me.
Yeah.
And it felt like the book was leading up to it in a way, you know?
Yes. I don't think it is contradicted later. If anything, I think it's supported later.
Yeah.
That some ghosts, once they've done what they want to do or their needs have been met, they can just go peacefully.
Right.
I mean, I wouldn't actually call this one peaceful, but you know what I'm saying.
It's not peaceful. Yeah. But like now there's no more, she's not going to kill anybody else. It feels like in the show, she would. If you let her out again, she would probably kill someone.
Or at least Lockwood thought that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that felt huge to me. And I was like, again, there's all of these little mystery crumbs happening at the end of the book that I think is such a great way to build a series and like just continue to building your world. Instead, it's so much confidence. It's so smart. And it's like trusts the reader too in a way that's really, really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I've talked before about how I enjoy when any storytelling treats its watchers or readers or whatever, consumers, intelligently, just believes them to be able to connect the dots.
Yeah.
Oh, and then, I don't know, Percy tries to run out the front door, but the cavalry is there.
Get caught by Deeprack, who's finally useful.
Yeah, can you imagine if Book Barnes was the cavalry? Like, I don't know. That inspires me with confidence.
Yeah, they're almost there by accident in the show. We talked about that. I like how Lockwood, it very much feels like an Agatha Christie thing. I don't think that, like, I've only read the first 3 books. It never feels quite like this again, where he's just utterly orchestrated.
Yeah, no.
Everything. It's very satisfying.
No, it is never quite like this again. I would say after book 2, all the major cases that they do are very related to the overarching plot.
And it's just messier and more personal and stuff, which is good.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, I think this familiar kind of structure and like how we've been using kind of detective tropes throughout and stuff like that, it really helps like build this first book and give it like this really solid climactic punch. And it's on its own terms too. Like, it used all the rules that it taught you all the way through to like build the case in a way that's like very convincing, and to have Annabelle, you know, serve her own justice and stuff feels very noir to me.
Yes. Yes.
It all just really, really works on like many levels. It's so strong.
It's very
So, like,
satisfying.
Yeah, it's good.
So, best joke?
Best joke. I mean, which George joke is the best joke?
Mine is the make sure you don't step on the Fitz kid. Because it's such a tense moment. And then George is just like, I gotta break the tension. I just gotta. You know, like, it's so good. I think I genuinely laughed out loud while reading that this time.
It's a good like tension switch.
Yeah.
Like, that always makes you laugh harder if you feel scared or upset. Yeah, that's a good one. I always hesitate to be like, well, if it's the best, I should really
just
justify it.
Just best in this moment. It doesn't have to be the best.
I know. Best. I agree. I'm neurotic and it's bad. I think for me, it's like the good tone joke that happens around like we build up so much tension in the red room before anything even really kicks off. Mm-hmm. And then there's the whole thing about George's underwear.
Oh yeah,
on
that
the
one's
floor
good too.
In the bathroom, and it leading to the tap, tap, tap. And it which is like a genuinely scary thing of the tap, tap, tap sound. But it's just like, I don't know, masterful silliness.
Yep. It's really good.
Yeah. I don't think there's a bad joke in here. Like, it's used really well.
Yeah. The humor in this section in particular is top notch and placed in all the right places.
Yeah.
I think most punk rock, I don't even remember, but it must be, we must have said it was this in the show also, because it has to be Lucy unleashing a ghost.
It's so cool too. Like, the thing that I read, it's like, it feels like punk rock for Annabelle. Like, she knows, like, it's my moment.
Yeah. I agree. There's no other choice really. All right. I think we're done. Did you have anything else to cover?
No, I think that's it for this time. Next time we're going to be talking about the final section, but we're also going to be just like wrapping up the whole book and our thoughts on what the whole book will be.
Yeah. Also, I know we've always like given out our email and our Twitter and stuff, but we're recording these in advance. So if you did send us anything, we wouldn't be able to respond. But if you do have any questions, like, send them in. We can do a separate in the middle episode.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Mailbag thing.
Mailbag type of thing. I don't think anybody has said anything recently. Although most people, like, they tweet us and then we just have a conversation about it. And then it's like,
I know.
Now we don't need to address it.
No need to make content of this.
Yeah, exactly. But if you do want to, you can follow and tweet at the show on Twitter, obviously at Lockwood Podcast. And if you want, you can follow me on Twitter at Inferior Caitlin.
You can send your emails to contact@holograndmedia.com. You can go to the website, just scroll down to the bottom, which is the contact page at hologrammedia.com/contact.
And I keep wanting to remember that ClusterCon is coming up this weekend, but this won't be out before then. So
nope,
that's
it already
useless.
happened. Time travel.
I didn't come up with anything, but I did just bump my face on my microphone.
And remember, Mojo, don't lick my face into the mic. That's gross.
And remember to always use your rural accent while fake selling your friend's comic collection.
Which we didn't even bring up.
No, but it's funny.